Welcome in college baseball central fans of Texas. Like every great baseball starting pitcher, we're kicking it off at 7:05. Kind of the skeleton crew as Marshall and Jackson are both on spring break. It's myself, Jake McKeever, Joey, our resident Texas fan. Joey, just meeting you tonight. How we doing?
Oh, doing good. It's been a very quiet day. Looking forward to this all day, so I'm glad it's finally here.
Yeah, it's been definitely a long baseball day. We'll start into it with
Mhm.
kind of the series of the week last weekend. Texas traveled up to Dan Law Field, took on Texas Tech. They took 2 of 3 from them. Friday night, it was just an offensive onslaught as Porter Brown and Rylan Galvan, who was the DH, had 5 RBIs. Will Gasparino had 4 RBIs. It was kind of great to see him kind of break out, as I know Pierce has been really high on him. Saturday, Gavin Cash went 4 for 5, really kind of led that offense. Texas really didn't get a lot going as they pounded the zone. Sunday, the Gage Bohm game for Texas. He closed it out, going 4 innings, allowing only 1 run. Joey, how do you think Texas did this weekend? Because they seem to do a lot of things right, where in the past they really hadn't done it. What did you see from your boys?
Yeah, so based off to begin, I saw much more positive stuff than I anticipated. So I feel like there was parts where it was like Texas was running it, and then parts where Tech was running it. But a lot of good stuff all around. Friday night was a very great development with the offense, and the way they battled back on Sunday to come from behind was a very, very good sign because it looked like Tech was going to run away with it, but then the Longhorns fought back and showed some resiliency. So I'm nothing but impressed by how we did this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very impressive game. Friday night, the Bats kind of showed up for, I think, the first time in a Friday night game. There were a few lineup changes. That game really wasn't that close. And then Sunday, that's been kind of the story of Texas this season so far, is just the ability of the back end bullpen to get overtaxed. And I think Texas did a really good job of kind of staying in front of that bullpen. The Gage Bohm 4 innings at the end
Yeah.
was a really, really big boost. A few notes. I mean, Jared Thomas really was down. I think that was kind of the most impressive part for me, was that Texas was able to kind of go out, have quality at bats when, Jared Thomas, who is kind of been their offensive catalyst. So there's been a few games this year where he has been the offense. Another note, I think the walks. I mean, is that kind of concerning for you as a Texas fan? They took a lot of walks, but it almost seemed like they needed a walk at times to get them going. And they left a ton of guys on. They left 9 on Friday, 10 Saturday, and then 9 more on Sunday. So there is still kind of some worry there for Texas, but overall, I think it was a good weekend for them.
Yeah, it was a lot of good things all around. And another thing, I feel like Max Bellew has solidified himself as a dude for the Longhorns, hitting a home run in each of the 3 games this weekend. So he's going to be someone. I was really high on him to begin the season, and he is going to keep getting better from here.
Yeah, he's really kind of been an unexpected bright spot. I mean, David Pierce always just gets production out of guys that you really don't expect. And this year it's, Baloo the Bear out there. I love tweeting out that gif of Baloo the Bear from the Jungle Book. Before we kind of jump into Texas Tech and kind of preview their series, Texas has Washington, Air Force, and Baylor. I mean, this feels like the time where the Longhorns are really, really going to get rolling. I mean, they play 3 really, really inferior opponents. Washington has truly struggled every time they've come to Texas and played. I expect the Longhorns to kind of dominate. Keys to the series for them, I said, win every at-bat, get in front of the bullpen, and then get young guys at bats. I think this is going to be one of those weekends where we see a ton of guys. Is that kind of what you're seeing from Texas?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be more of a developmental weekend for Texas. I already did watch Washington a little bit because they played in the Kleberg Classic a couple weeks ago in Corpus. And while playing, they did beat Corpus pretty good, but that was before Corpus got hot, so to speak. So I think Texas should roll over Washington pretty easily. So I just feel like the best key would be seeing just development all around would probably be the best way to approach. Keep the bullpen fresh, throw arms, different arms, and just proceed from there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the same thing with Texas too as well. They do play Air Force twice, so
Mhm.
the less that they can kind of use those bullpen, get a lot of those guys. So if there's going to be one where they drop, I think it's going to be in those Air Force kind of
Yeah.
midweeks. But again, I expect Texas to really sweep Washington and really honestly sweep Baylor. They're going to be at home against Baylor. I expect this is kind of where Texas gets going a little bit, and they get a
Yeah, I
little hot, and they kind of get back in
think
that
in
hosting conversation.
that 8-game stretch, I think 6-2 is the bare minimum. And
Mhm.
Air Force has always given Texas a good battle through the years, namely a couple years ago when Paul Skeens was there. But Air Force always is a good team year in, year out. So I think not. I always say don't take any team lightly, and Air Force is the epitome of that team that could sneak up and beat you if you're not careful.
Yep, I've got to see this Air Force team up close and personal too, as well as they were down in Sugarland. They're a smaller team. They definitely look
Yeah,
like people who are designed to fit in planes, and I don't think they should be on the same field as Texas. If I'm
they
being honest, I know
shouldn't.
that sounds a little arrogant. They really shouldn't. Texas should kind of go out and dominate this one. I
Yeah,
expect them to almost go. I expect them to almost go 7-1. I think that's kind of my prediction for Texas. Um,
yeah. I'm thinking 7-1 as well. I was about to say, given the state of baseball, there will probably be a loss. Which the optimistic side of me is like, okay, 8-0, run the table. But I think 7-1 is much more feasible in my opinion as well.
Moving on to the team that Texas beat over the weekend, Texas Tech. They have Baylor this weekend. Friday, they really, really looked terrible. Their Friday night guy didn't look elite at all. I mean, yeah, they scored, was it 8 runs, but Gavin Cash really didn't look very good. And I think he's kind of the key to their offense. I think if they can get him going and get him on base, I think he kind of creates havoc. As I know he's a power hitting first baseman, but he bats leadoff for him. Keys to the series for Tech Baylor. I think you have to get Cash going. You have to get ahead in the bullpen, and then you have to not beat yourself. And then for Baylor, it's Mason Marriott. He's kind of their best hitter, or sorry, he's their Friday night guy. They really kind of did a good job limiting Houston's roster, but again, I think Texas Tech's team is just a whole different beast. And then I know I'm going to butcher this name, but Enzo Apodaca, the Gonzaga transfer, he's kind of the one bat to circle in their lineup, as well as Will Pendergrass. But again, I think Texas Tech, their pitching is gonna need to be a lot better this weekend. But again, it's a Baylor team that really kind of prides themselves on being a pitching team. So it's almost like a super, super bad matchup for Baylor, I think. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Like about Gavin Cash, obviously, he's a huge force for Tech, and when he rolls, Tech rolls. So if he can come into the series like he did on Saturday, then I think Tech will be in good shape. And I did watch a little bit of the Baylor U of H series, and I was not impressed by Baylor by any means. Granted, I think I'm a little higher on Houston than most, so that might have been why I thought that. But I think Tech should not have much difficulty in taking the series from the Bears.
Yep, but it is the Big 12. It
Mhm.
is at Baylor, which
Yeah,
shouldn't matter. But Tech always just seems to lose these kind of like funsy series on the road in the Big 12. Like I know West Virginia ended up being better, but they lost to West Virginia really
yeah.
early in the year, and everybody was kind of like the Big 12 is just weird.
Mhm.
But honestly, I think I'm predicting the upset with Baylor. I think that Tech drops this series. I know that this is kind of a get right quick series for them, but Tech is just so weird away from their home ballpark at Dan Laws. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. Are you seeing the same, or you think Tech dominates?
I think Tech 2 out of 3 is what I'm thinking because like you're right about how Tech is very inconsistent at times away from Lubbock, but this is a very good opportunity for them to get things right this weekend. So I'm gonna ride with that.
We won't spend too much time on this next series. Houston goes out to BYU. I really kind of expect them to dominate this series. I think BYU and Cincinnati are a class below. I think if
Mhm.
Houston kind of continues that bullpen and the timely hitting, I think that they'll kind of roll here. But again, I think Houston just has they can't really say this too often in the Big 12, but I think they're just going to out talent a BYU team. The only thing that worries me about this series is the weather going up there to BYU. It's snowy. But other than that, expect Houston to kind of dominate and get
Yeah.
and don't look now, but that's going to be back-to-back series wins, I think, for Houston, and they're going to be right there at the top of the Big 12.
Hmm. I completely agree with that. Houston is my dark horse in the Big 12, and they're going to keep.
I believe it. I was laughed at when I said that they were going to finish above OU, and that one's kind of coming a little bit more true.
Yeah.
Moving on to the SEC, Texas A&M. They have Florida this weekend. They're still undefeated. Florida obviously is still a top 10, top 5 team. I know that they've struggled early, but when you look up and down this lineup for Florida, I think that there really, really is a lot to like. Cade Curlin, Jack Caglione, Luke Heyman, Colby Shelton, and Ty Evans are all hitting over 350 and really, really taking quality at bats. I mean, I got to watch them on Sunday, not in person, but just on TV, and they just seemed to like double their guys to death. They took very, very quality at bats. They had long pitching, which again, that's kind of, I think, the weakness of this A&M team is that bullpen. I mean, the starters have a .63 ERA. Aschenbach is almost like that quote-unquote fourth starter, as he usually goes about 4 innings. But outside of that, I think that's where Florida can kind of get to A&M. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I was watching last night's A&M Sam Houston game, and I started noticing like the bullpen issues of A&M, and I'm like, I could see that being an issue against Florida, especially with how deep the lineup is. So, I mean, A&M will hit their way to against Florida, but whether they take the series or not depends on how the back end goes.
They're going to need Prager. They're going to need Tanner Jones to both go 5, 6, 7 innings and save to where if they – because I think with this Florida lineup, they're going to get in a bullpen game, whether it be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And I think if they can push it to Sunday, I think it really pays dividends. But the keys to the series that I have for A&M are continue to kind of dominate and throw that first punch. I know Florida is really, really great at scoring in the first inning too as well. A&M has scored first in every single game that they played. In 13 of their games, they have scored in that first inning. I mean, Jay Slavalette and Braden Montgomery are probably one of the best 1-2 duos in the country. Mm-hmm. Second base is still open. I don't know who we're going to see there because it kind of just seems like almost like Texas at catcher, where everybody seems to be doing things right, that it really is kind of a tough decision. But it is the road in the SEC. This is kind of the first time, we get the gloves off with Sully. But this doesn't feel like a Kevin O'Sullivan team down there in Florida. I think that the bullpen issues are kind of the same thing with Florida too as well. And if A&M can kind of get in front of that, I think that's going to be the big, big key of this series is, who kind of wins the 6th, 7th, and 8th innings of all these games. I think that's going to tell the story of all these.
Yeah, I expect this to be a high-scoring series regardless because I was doing some scouting for Florida when they were playing St. John's, and I noticed the bullpen stuff as well. So I was like, should be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the thing to track is, Kevin O'Sullivan likes to pitch guys on short rest. He likes to bring Friday night guys on Sunday. So I think that's what we're going to see. Cags has been really, really kind of tearing it up on the pitching side. I know that we talked about his hitting. He's hitting over 400, but he's almost being a better pitcher. I think the one knock on him, though, is he usually only works to about the 5th inning just because he's a really kind of swing and miss guy who kind of dances around the zone. So I think if A&M can kind of get on Sunday, get him out, I think that's going to be when they win those games.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the way I see it right now, I think Florida takes it against the Aggies. They're going to take 2 out of 3. So, and a large part of that will be them shutting down Laviolette and Montgomery. And so I'm pretty high on Florida right now. They're starting to click.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, too, about I think that Florida takes 2 of 3. I know as an A&M kind of guy, I mean, it's just so hard to go and win games in conference on the road. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. I think that A&M has just been riding. I mean, they almost lost to Sam last night, and they should have lost to Rhode Island on Sunday. But, I mean, they really just haven't faced a lot of adversity. And Florida, it sounds weird to say because Florida's lost a ton of games, but Florida's just faced a lot of adversity. I think that they've been punched in the mouth a lot more than A&M. It seems like A&M every time they not necessarily have an excuse, but like Rhode Island, it was pitchers that really probably aren't going to see the conference roster. Same thing with Sam. I mean, other than Aschenbach, who really came in and shut the door, you're not going to see a lot of these guys, I think. So that's kind of the one thing about A&M. But we'll move on to your Islanders. They take on the Dallas Baptist Patriots. We'll let you kind of do your little segue about your alma mater. What should we expect from A&M Corpus Christi this weekend?
Okay, so as we speak, the Islanders are currently in the midst of playing U of H Victoria in a get me together kind of game. I'm trying to get an update as we speak, but they've been playing very hot. We took 2 out of 3 against ACU, who is very good. They took 2 out of 3 against UTSA, who is very good. And then they won a couple midweek. They won against Texas State last Tuesday. So the hitting is starting to. Oh yeah, by the way, it's 7-0. So, yeah. So the hitting is starting to get in stride. Pitching is starting to get it together. Sebastian Trinidad won the Southland Conference Player of the Week after he basically teed off against UTSA pitching, and I was pretty high on him. I mean, given he was at HCU before Tammy CC, the fact that he's putting it all together now is a very big development in the Islander lineup. And then there's also a couple of key pieces. Like, keep in mind, most of the Islanders are new this year. Basically, they brought in a whole bunch of junior college guys, so it was like a hard to figure out what to expect. But now there's some sort of continuity developing, and it's starting to see like guys are stepping up, like Garrett Gruhl and Logan Vaughn are two that have been hitting a lot for the Islanders. And on the pitching side, Watson returns. He's been as consistent as ever. And then Riley Hunsaker has stepped up as the number 2 on the rotation. And then there's been a couple arms, Zach Garcia, Evans Hendricks, that have been throwing some quality innings the last week or two. So the Islanders will be entering this weekend's series in very good shape against DBU. So it should definitely be a good series.
I think it's going to be a good series. My keys for A&M Corpus Christi, Joey, I'm very proud of this. Ride the waves. I think that DBU is going to come out, hit him in the mouth a little bit. I think if they kind of ride those waves, I think limiting Ethan Mann and Michael, I think it's Ditello. I'm going to have to check a pronunciation. He's been just an absolute stud at the top of that DBU lineup. He always seems to kind of get on base. He's on base, I think, more than he's not. And then Ryan Johnson, I think he's going to be a big key. He's been the Friday night guy for DBU. He threw 7 innings of 5-hit ball last week. He's looked really, really good. And then for DBU, I think it's kind of just, hold steady. They got through the toughest part of their schedule. They're now kind of starting to get into conference play. I know that A&M Corpus Christi isn't a conference opponent. But, I mean, Grant J is fighting his complacency. He's sitting over 367. He's hit 9 home runs. He's looked every bit of the best player in the Conference USA. And I think just kind of fighting that complacency as they've already beat these good teams, I think that that's where DBU is really, really going to shine because they beat a lot of these good teams going forward.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see because the Islanders have had 3 straight weekends of playing in Corpus, the Kleberg at Whataburger Field and the last 2 at Chapman Field. So this is going to be their first actual road test in nearly a month. So I could see things being a little shaky. So I'm probably not going to pick the Islanders. I think DBU should probably take the series convincingly, but every game will be a dogfight, so to speak, and the Islanders will give DBU all they can handle, and especially with how hot they've been right now with the Islanders.
I was going to say, there's a reason that we're highlighting this series. I think DBU takes it, but I think that there's going to be a few scare games in there. And again, we're going to kind of see DBU. I know that they've been very resilient in the past. I think that that's what we're going to see from them this weekend. Moving on to, I think, the other kind of surprise of the Conference USA, the Sam Houston State Bearcats. They play New Mexico State. They are a team that I really can't figure out because at times they look really, really good. Like they beat Oklahoma State. They really had Houston kind of on the ropes. They had A&M on the ropes last night. But then there's just a few games. They swept Texas State. They're just so streaky at the plate. I mean, there's sometimes where they'll score 8-9 runs a game, and then you'll see them on a Tuesday against way worse pitching, and they'll only score 1 run a game. What do you kind of see from the Sam Houston State Bearcats team?
I mean, the thing about Sam Houston is like you make a good point about how inconsistent they are. Like I'm looking at the scores right now. Yeah, they took 2 out of 3 against Oklahoma State in impressive fashion. Beat Dartmouth pretty
Don't
easy.
look at the Sunday game though for that
Yeah,
series.
I just saw that. I'm probably not going to say anything about that. And St. John's has been giving everybody fits, so I'm not going to put that against them.
Yeah,
But
but they shut him out on Friday. Like that was the
yeah,
part that was so crazy to me
that's
is
the
they
crazy.
like shut him out.
And then it's like they've shown glimpses of promise, and that's what I've been noticing from the Bearcats in recent years. It's like when they're really on, they're through the roof, but when they're not on,
Yeah,
they're
it's like
scary.
one run against Houston on a Tuesday night against with
And
like
yeah,
the first guy to the bullpen for Houston I think went 4 innings, and they
yeah,
really just kind of compounded bat at bat after bat at bat after bat at bat. I will say this: I think that they truly have one of the most underrated teams. I think Walker Yannick, their catcher, is probably the best and most athletic catcher in the country. I think
mhm.
he's going to shoot up on a lot of draft boards. And then Malachi Lott and Lane Brewster at the corner outfield. I think that they're kind of one of the better duos in the Conference USA. I know that Lane Brewster, they move him around a lineup. It seems like sometimes he bats leadoff, sometimes he bats ninth. So they really
Oh,
haven't found a lineup spot for him. But I mean, he's just a spark plug. I think every time you see him, like he's just always running around doing crazy stuff. And then Malachi Lott, he's been really, really impressive for Sam Houston. He was at Houston last year, which is just kind of a mouthful to say. But I think that those two, I think, are going to be the key to Sam Houston going forward. And if they can start compounding good at bats, I think that the freshmen that they start a freshman at shortstop. I think that they're going to start get rolling in this Conference USA because it really does kind of feel wide open outside of DBU.
yeah. I was about to say, like, I was thinking about the Conference USA like competition earlier, and it's basically DBU and Sam's conference to lose. So it's if like I was just thinking, like if Sam can string together the ABs and be more consistent, then it shouldn't be too hard for them to keep up with DBU at that point.
Moving on to, I think, the most frustrating team in Texas, the Texas State Bobcats. They sit at 8-8. They went 1-2 in Round Rock, 2-2 in Houston. They recently lost 5 straight after beating Texas. They won on Tuesday night. They open with App State and Sun Belt play, and I think the Sun Belt is kind of turning into a different beast. I think it's almost better than the Pac. Where do you see Texas State kind of falling in the Sun Belt?
I mean, I'm pretty high on the Bobcats, but I literally saw them play Corpus last Tuesday, and I was not impressed by them. So I don't think they're 2022 level good, but they're definitely going to be a top half team. Like they did show some promise in the game I saw in person and the UT game, of course. So it just depends. Like they're a very similar team to Sam. It's like when they put it all together, they're unstoppable. But when they aren't, they're just all over the place, and you don't know what to expect. So I'm thinking. I was about to say Coastal Carolina and the Sun Belt, and then it's just I think Texas State is probably like a 3 or a 4 for now. Good team, but it's going to be very tough to get to that upper echelon to the Coastal Carolinas of the world.
Yeah, let me pull up the Sun Belt just so, I mean, with conference realignment, it's so hard to kind of track where people are. But I mean, Troy's legit.
Yeah, Troy.
Madison beat Arkansas on a Sunday. The Cajuns are always feisty. I mean, there's a lot of teams. I think that
Southern Miss.
South Alabama. I don't know. Like I expect more from Texas State. I mean, they were kind of the talk of Houston pre-Sunday. Chase Mora, Lugo, and Farber, they just didn't take quality at bats against Sam Houston, and Sam Houston is not upper talented than I think the Coastals of the world. So, I mean, they're just going to have to be better. Like, I know that sounds weird to say, and it's such a simplistic thing to say, but they have one of the best lineups in the country when it clicks. It just rarely clicks. It seems like it's either all or nothing with them.
Yeah, it's very inconsistent. Like, if the team that beat Texas keeps playing like that, then they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. But that is who knows if we'll get to see that team anytime from here on out, which is not good to say the least for the Bobcats.
Yeah, this might be the last time we talk about them. Moving on, as we kind of do a little mid-major spotlight, the Southland. We highlighted Lamar, UIW, McNeese, and Nichols. I know McNeese and Nichols aren't really Texas teams, but I think that they're going to be the two dogs in that division. McNeese has a really, really good staff. Nichols seems to just be beating the doors off of everybody. But UIW's really, really impressed me. They're sitting at 13-5 right now. Ryan Scott, who really wasn't supposed to be an everyday guy, he's hitting nearly 500, and he's now starting for him. Dalton Beck is really kind of an underrated bat down there in San Antonio. JD Gregson, the A&M transfer, hitting in the 4-hole. I think he really provides a lot of stability. And then Matt Marlowe. I mean, it seems like this UIW lineup is kind of what Lamar was last year, where they just kind of go out, rake. You don't know what they're going to get from a pitching side, but they know that they're not going to get a lot from a pitching side. So I've been really, really impressed with UIW.
Yeah, I'm actually planning on going to go see, given I'm in the San Antonio area. I'm planning on going to go see UIW play Corpus next weekend. So I'm really excited to see how UIW looks. Like, I'm looking at their scores right now. They've put up quite a few outbursts. Like, I know they haven't really played the toughest of teams, but they've had a 22-run game. They had the 23-run game last Wednesday. So they're very, very capable of putting up runs at any time. And I was watching a little bit of the Texas game last night. It was 7-1 Longhorns, but I could see
that was the best. That's the best team I think Texas is going to play for a while, I think.
Yep. Yeah, and UIW gave Texas all they can handle at various points of the game. So I came out of that game last night very impressed with UIW. So it should be interesting to see how they do come conference play.
I think the other team that's really impressed me in the Southland is Lamar. I know that last year that they kind of not fizzled out down the stretch, but I think that they were a lot higher on people's radars. A lot of people were kind of looking for them to break into the tournament, and they kind of got cold there at the wrong time. Last year, they really didn't have the pitching, but this year, I don't think that's really the case. I think Jacob Ellis on Friday night provides them the stability for a guy that's going to go 7 innings, limit runs, limit walks, pound the zone, which I think is something that Lamar didn't really have last year. River Orsak is hitting over 400 with some gap-to-gap pop. I think he's kind of a guy that you can kind of highlight as a Southland Conference Player of the Year. Zach Skinner's been taking a ton of quality at bats for him. Braden Evans is another guy that I think you really, really need to highlight and circle if you're playing this Lamar team. But the Southland might be the most open division in college baseball. It's a bunch of teams that are all the exact same. I mean, outside of Houston Christian, obviously, they all have similar fan bases, and it's just going to be a dogfight. It seems like every single weekend, anybody can beat anybody in that conference.
Yeah, that's what I love about the Southland. Like last year, like the differential between I think the second seed and the 7th seed was only like a couple games. Like, because I remember the Islanders came into the final series against UIW. They win another game, they go to 2. If they lose, they go to 7, and they lost and went to 7. So it's a crapshoot most years, and very high quality baseball for the mid-major level, which is something that I've always loved about the Southland. Every team will be giving it their best any given day and any given week. And Lamar is showing better pitching this year. And I remember when they came back from the WAC a couple of years ago, I was thinking, okay, they might be better than they were before they left the Southland. And I think they're starting to get around to that now.
Yeah, Nichols is 17-3. All 3 of their losses are in midweeks. Against South Alabama, they lost by 1 in 10 innings. Tulane, they lost by 1. And then Tulane, they lost by 2, where they scored 12 runs. So Nichols might be the team to beat in the Southland. I think that they're a really, really talented team. But, Joey, we're running out of time here as we kind of get that 30-minute mark. Any closing remarks?
I don't think I have any off the top of my head.
It's going to be another great week of baseball in Texas. I know that I'll be at Rice Friday night to see Parker Smith, and then Sunday I'll be at Baylor when they play Texas Tech. So I'll get to see Texas Tech for the first time. But really, really exciting stuff. Once again, this has been Jake McKeever and Joey. Next week we'll have Marshall and Jackson back from spring break. So the skeleton crew, I guess we'll just have to save it for another week. See everybody next week.
See ya.